your seatbelt. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
Chrissie is hilarious.
Chrissie, have you ever heard of the comedian Basha K. Ali?
No, that sounds like something you yell out before you blow up a plane.
30 seconds remaining.
But you know what, good thing to say, I doubt it will stand up to something. I haven't been disrespectful to you at all.
I was very confused by the title, Everything Everywhere All at Once, because that's also what we call it when Ash takes off his shirt. I shouldn't be up here. I should be in school on the other side of the ocean. Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to another episode of the Chrissie Mayr podcast. You can listen to this podcast everywhere: Spotify, SoundCloud, Rumble, Rockfin, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook. Even for some reason, Facebook still exists. Please like and subscribe on YouTube. And thank you to everybody who has already subscribed and got me to 100,000 followers on YouTube. Very, very exciting stuff. Our guest today is somebody I have been so excited to have on for a long time, and I'm so happy she is here today. She's a wife, mother, former school board member, and she's the co-founder of Moms for Liberty. Welcome to the show, Tiffany Justice. Hello,
Hey,
Tiffany.
Hey, how are you?
You've probably done, how many interviews would you say you've done?
I don't know, hundreds. I've done hundreds for the past 4 years. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, no doubt about it. A lot of interviews, talking to people, just really trying to bring people together on issues, recognizing that it's not, Democrat or Republican. These are issues that are all impacting our lives, and we've got a lot more in common than we do different. I sound like Kamala when I say that, so I won't say that again. But
You're trying, just as long as you don't say you're trying to be unburdened.
that's right.
And that you're from a middle-class family.
That's right.
Tiffany, were you raised to be kind of political one way or another? Like, were your parents politically charged? Do you feel like this
Nope.
passion just started for Moms for Liberty?
Yeah, I wasn't actually political at all. And I was in a family where we voted, like I knew my parents voted, and I would always watch the debates, and they were interested in politics and from, the presidential standpoint, but we really were not involved in local politics at all. It wasn't kind of like a GOP Republican thing. I never thought about running for office. And then I advocated for my own kids' school in 2016. The school was falling apart. The hallways were leaking. You have to remember, in Florida, we have outdoor schools, right? A lot of the doors open to the outside. And so I advocated for my kids' school, and we can talk more about that if you want. And then someone said, hey, you're pretty good at this. You should run for school board. And then I did, and I won in 2016. And the Democrats didn't support me, and the Republicans didn't support me, and I still won with 60% of the vote. So
Why did neither side support you?
Democrats didn't support me because there was a gentleman that I was running against. He was a Republican. And I just said, when they wanted to do events, I said, you need to have both of us there. You can't just pick me as your favorite. You need to have me and him. And they didn't like that about me, that I wasn't, they weren't able to control me, which is what the unions really want to be able to do to board members. And then the Republicans didn't like me because they had basically chosen a 23-year-old young man as their candidate of choice. I wasn't running at the time, and when I found out that a 23-year-old might represent me and our 4 kids on school board from my district, I thought, well, maybe it's a good time for me to step up to the plate.
And I doubt the 23-year-old was a parent yet.
No, he wasn't. He was a nice guy. He had, I think, probably a bright, strong political career in front of him. But, school board is often, Chrissie, this job and this elected position that people think isn't that big of a deal. A lot of people think of it as like a stepping stone into a political career. But the truth of the matter is that school boards spend the most amount of your money. In Florida, your property taxes, half of your property taxes go to your school board. And they're making some of the most important decisions in your community, including being one of the largest employers. And so it just, we really felt like in starting Moms for Liberty, we needed to put a focus on school board and what an important position it was for your community, for the future of our country. And teachers unions have largely been the ones who focused on school board.
I can see maybe people would think being on a school board is a stepping stone to a political career because it sounds like it could be easier to get on a school board than to run for, I don't know, like governor or local office. But maybe I have no idea what I'm talking about, but
Easier than governor, probably about the same as a county commissioner, or something like that. Especially now, we only endorse in school board races at Moms for Liberty. So I think we've upped the game and made it cool to be on school board again. But yeah, I mean, normally a lot of the races, you don't have to raise a lot of money. I raised $40,000 in my race, which was a lot at the time, but I really wanted to win. And my husband was my finance treasurer, and he would just crack the whip all the time. Tiffany, you haven't raised enough money yet. If you have your husband work on your campaign with you, and he's a pretty driven person, then you know that you're gonna meet your goals.
oh wow. I don't have too much experience with fundraising. I've hosted a couple comedy shows for libertarian candidate Larry Sharp when he ran for governor of New York a couple years ago, and I had a hard time just asking people for donations like as a host. So how do you get over that? Or do you
It's hard to ask for money, honestly. I felt like I was running in order to represent the people, to represent, the parents in the community on the school board. There really weren't any other parents that were on the school board at that time. It was mostly older people. And the truth is, if you're not in the community, when I had 4 kids in 3 different public schools when I ran for school board, that's a lot.
Oof.
Yeah. So, I didn't just hear about, a lot of time when you're on school board, you get a lot of complaints. People people want to talk to you oftentimes when something's going wrong. Well, if the only time that you're ever interacting with anyone is at the supermarket or at church, and you're hearing these types of things, you may not have a good idea of the district as a whole. And as a mom who had kids in school and school board, who had so many friends who had kids in different schools in the community, I just was very connected. So I got to see, we'd make policy at the school board level. I got to see how it was implemented at the school level. My friends were honest with me, right? Would talk to me about what was really happening with their kids. So I think it made me a really good school board member. And I give 100% to whatever I do. And so I raising that money, I just said to people, I'm going to get on that school board and work really hard to represent you and to put kids first. And people believed in me, which was great. And so, yeah, I was happy to get elected. But, you ask me, I hadn't been political at all. I always felt like politics was something somebody else did. That's why I think I like President Trump so much, because I think he kind of felt the same way. Like, oh, he's not a politician, he's a business person. And then he realized, oh, wait a second. Like, maybe I have to step up and do this. I kind of understand his spirit there.
Yeah, exactly. Like the people who should be in power are those that don't seek it, and this country should be run like a business. And I feel like we were all doing pretty great when he was during his first term. The whole time you've been mentioning like that the doors are open in Florida, like there's outdoor schools. I keep picturing like, are the crocodiles getting in? Are the random?
Well, if there is water in Florida, then you should always expect that there are alligators. No crocodiles, but you should always expect alligators. And there's probably been, I have no doubt, if you search alligator Florida school, that there's an alligator that's been found in some retention pond in some Florida school somewhere.
In my middle school, I'm from New York. We were talking a little bit before we started recording. Like Tiffany moved from New York to Florida when she was around 8, and we're from like similar parts of Long Island, but I stayed out there where everybody eventually gets cancer. But we had in my middle school, we had a like a little zoo in the school, like in the basement of the zoo, and I had like this. I just remember I was banned from the zoo because I had a hamster. I was holding a hamster and I dropped it and it scurried away. And I think the guy that was in charge of the zoo was also like the shop teacher. And I think the gerbil may have like scurried near the snake tank. But I don't know. It's not my. I mean, it still haunts me to this day. But I love animals, and
I wish all we had to deal with in schools was a gerbil getting too close to the snake's cage. Unfortunately, it's like our children are in the snake's cage when they're in our public schools right now. Some of the stuff that's happening in the schools is pretty incredible.
So what exactly led you to founding Moms for Liberty?
Yeah, so I told you I ran for school board because I was really upset that kids had wet shoes. There'd be kids that would come to school. Their shoes would get wet because it was pouring rain. And then my kids would swap out their shoes. And they had 2 pairs of sneakers because I knew one pair would have to dry.
Oh, that's so smart. You would send them to school with 2 pairs of shoes?
No, I would just make them change at the end of
Oh,
the
okay.
No.
Okay.
I wasn't that smart. But, the next day they didn't have to wear wet shoes, right? But there were some kids who didn't have 2 pairs of sneakers because sneakers are expensive or can be. And, so their shoes would be wet the next day. And I was like, gosh, this is just ridiculous. Like, why doesn't somebody fix this? And I went to the principal and I asked her why the school wasn't getting fixed. And she said, oh, well, I've asked before, but, the district doesn't really like when we ask too many questions. And, Chrissy, you've known me for 5 minutes now, but I was like, I don't care if they don't like me. I'll ask as many questions as I want. Right. And so I went and I spoke to the district, and ultimately what I found was the fact that not only did this principal didn't want a lot of attention on the school because there was a large segment of the kids at the school who were not reading on grade level. And specifically Black students at the school reading at only about 25% of Black students reading on grade level in 4th grade. And yet her school continued to get an A under the Florida grading system because there was a large segment of students at the school that could read who were covering and masking those students' failure. And, I told her she should give the A back. That it was a lie to parents if, that she was saying that it was an A school, but their kids weren't going to learn to read. And she didn't like that. She eventually was replaced once I was on school board. So that was good. And so I ran for office. I won, and then just started seeing, like, when you get into the system and you're involved and you ask questions, and I think we're going to see this with the president too, and a lot of his cabinet members and the Doge people like Vivek and Elon. When you ask questions and you disrupt the system, you're the problem. You're chaos. Everything was fine until the Moms for Liberty got here. Everything was fine on the school board. Everyone got along until Tiffany Justice was there. And, I got there and I just kept saying, like, we don't like the outcomes. Why do we keep doing things the same way? Why? I don't understand. I tried to get on an African-American Achievement Committee that was giving $500 stipends for Martin Luther King Day parades to schools. And that was how they were trying to boost African-American achievement in the district. And we were still under a DSAG order. And not to get into the weeds, but I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is unacceptable. Right. And of course I was considered the problem. So, Moms for Liberty gets founded January 1st of 2021. My school board term ended at the end of November. Tina Deskovich, the other co-founder of the organization, was on a school board in an adjacent county. And we just saw the government really thought that they knew better than us for our kids. They really thought that it was okay for bureaucrats to make decisions about our kids and their medical care, their health and safety at school. And we saw some of the gender stuff happening with the private forms, secret forms and it was just like, who does this government think they are? Our parental rights do not stop at the classroom door. And I said that to a superintendent. I said to him at one point when he wanted to create a medical committee, he said, oh, we're just going to invite the head of the hospital and we'll invite, we'll have some doctors. And I said, you don't just pick doctors that make recommendations for my kids. Even the doctor that I take my kids to makes a recommendation, and I decide what I want to do with that recommendation. And, and I just looked at him and I said, we do not co-parent with the government. And that was kind of just the beacon, the cry out as we started Moms for Liberty. And we started January 1st, 2021 with 2 counties in our own communities. I live in a place called Indian River County. Tina was in Brevard County. And we had 2 counties that sprung up that moms who were advocating for their kids at the time and said they would start chapters. And then Moms for Liberty just spread like wildfire. And we had t-shirts made that said, we do not co-parent with the government on them. And we sold about $150,000 worth of t-shirts in our first year.
Holy cow. I was going to say, like, was it difficult to get the word out? Would you use social media at all? But this is all just word of mouth.
We use social media. Yeah, no, we use social media. I mean, we wrote an open letter to Mark Zuckerberg once on Facebook because he was kind of they were censoring some of our chapters. And we said, we wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for social media. We used X and we used Facebook, excuse me. But it was really word of mouth. And we didn't do any advertising. And so we started the 2 chapters January 1st. Within 2 weeks, we had Nassau County, New York.
Yeah, where I'm
Long
from.
Island. Yeah, that's right. Nassau County. It was not surprising to me. And they wanted to start a chapter. And then Anne Arundel, Maryland. Maryland has some of the most woke schools in the entire country.
Those are the first 2? districts?
First two
wow.
outside of Florida. Yep.
Oh, wow.
And then
Good
it
job,
just spread to
Nassau
all of them.
County. Wow, I'm really proud of you guys.
That's right.
That's exciting.
Are
Geez.
public school teachers supportive? I'm looking at your questions in your chat.
And this is all still during the pandemic. This
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
2021.
We were in
Wow.
lockdown. Masks. I fought like hell against masks on my own board. It was like 4-1 vote, 4-1 vote. There was no science that supported forced masking or forced quarantining. 6 feet was always totally arbitrary. There was no
Mhm.
evidence to support it. And it was just mass psychosis. I just watched people like fools, mask, double mask. I remember I said, let's open up the windows on the buses. And somebody
Yeah.
laughed at me. They said that was a joke. They laughed at me. And it was just like people lost their minds. And then it seemed like Americans had truly forgotten the fact that we have fundamental rights that the government doesn't give us, that they can't just take away when they feel like it. And
People really did forget that. It's like they were scared out of remembering or never knew. It's just that was the most frightening part of the pandemic, is watching people just completely lay down and be like, I don't know, you tell me what to do.
yeah, 100%. The only thing I hate more than being told what to do, sometimes someone knows more than you, they tell you what to do. It's still annoying to me. The only thing I hate more is being told what to do by idiots, by people who don't know what they're talking about or doing. Like, ridiculous. I see somebody says homemade masks. There were kids who would had cloth masks. They would wear them all day. They would sneeze into them. They'd wipe their mouth with them. Then they put it on their bike handlebar and then ride to school the next day and take the mask off and put it on their face all day long again. And, we had people who had like MRSA infections. There was strep that was manifesting. Strep can have a lot of mental health and cognitive ramifications that people don't always understand. Like sometimes it manifests into like OCD and other things. And so you had all these parents saying like, masks are hurting my kid. And you had all these school boards, these bureaucrats or elected officials saying, basically, we don't care. We're going to do what it is we want, and we don't care how it's affecting you or your family. And I was not.
Why do you think? And these people must have kids, the bureaucrats. So, like, how do you think they got to a place where they're just disassociating from their own common sense? Because anybody with common sense knew that the masks were bullshit. Anyone with common sense knew that the 6 feet was bullshit. So how do these people is there just some extreme financial benefit for them?
I think it depends what their motivating factor is. For elected officials, normally it's money and power. And so if money or power would be affected in some capacity, then they were willing to bend. I think it was fear too. We live in a society that was captured by fear. I've struggled with religion in my own life, but I think it was very clear during COVID that there were a lot of people who didn't have like a strong faith, who were scared of dying, that seemed like they were willing to do anything to like not die. And I don't know, I have some friends who are very religious. They're like, I can't wait to die. It's going to be amazing.
Can't wait. My back won't hurt anymore. Yeah.
But whatever. But, so I just think it's interesting. Like there was a spirit of fear that just captured people. And,
wow. I was the opposite. I was like, you know what? If I'm meant to be taken out of this world by a cold/flu, then I guess I was not as strong as I thought I was. And like, take me now, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
But the quarantining of the kids, like Chrissy, they'd have like, they quarantine 50 kids at a time. They walk around the school with a ruler, a 6-foot ruler, and basically like have one kid who supposedly got COVID, who tested positive. And they'd say like, were you in class yesterday with Johnny? And then they would go around 6 feet to wherever Johnny was, or possibly if you walked by Johnny in the hallway too closely. And then they would quarantine these kids. They put them all in a room, a holding pen, basically, where no adults were, by the way, because the adults were scared to get COVID.
They probably felt like lepers.
They did. And these kids were healthy. They would get out of school and the parents were like, go to the beach, go, you're quarantined for 2 weeks, like go to the beach, go. But the most heartbreaking thing was like one day, one of my daughter's friends was a swimmer. And those kids would get up so early in the morning, like every day of their lives, to get up and go to this, get in that cold pool, right? It's a tough
yeah.
sport.
I was a diver for 10 years. So
Okay.
it's like the early mornings and it's always freezing.
Yeah. So it's tough. You train a lot in those sports. And this girl got quarantined and she was supposed to have a big meet. And I think she was a junior at the time. And so it was a big, important meet for college. And they told her she was quarantined, so she wouldn't be able to swim. And I just watched her like, Chrissy, like break down in tears outside of the office, like just sink to her knees, sobbing. And the mom was there, and I just remember I was on school board at the time, and I was like, I am so sorry. Like,
Oh.
I am just so sorry. And what we did to these kids was awful.
She
I will
probably showed no
never.
symptoms. You know what I mean? If your lungs are strong enough for you to be a competitive swimmer in high school, it's like she probably wasn't showing any symptoms. She probably was fine. She probably would have
Really
done
healthy.
would have done great in her race. Yet they're taking her out. That's so insane.
What we did to these children, I will never allow to happen again. I'm telling you, over my dead body, will we ever quarantine children like that, close schools again, mask children? I have fought so hard. All the moms and Moms for Liberty are so passionate about the fact that children were just put on the back burner. We really saw how out of whack the priorities of the elected officials in America were during COVID, because they were just willing to sacrifice our kids to
They
anyone
were.
for
I'll never
anything.
forget there was like a viral clip going around of this like little kid, had to have been like preschool or kindergarten, and like everyone's seen this clip where it's like the kid all he wants is
Oh,
to
take the
breathe, and
mask.
he keeps trying to take it off, and the teacher keeps putting it on, like to the point where it's like snapping onto his face, and I was like, oh, it's the most heartbreaking thing
But
I've ever seen.
look at all the things we're learning about. I mean, I really think with RFK going into HHS, and Dave Weldon at CDC, and Jay Bhattacharya at the NIH, I mean, we're going to find out all this money that's been spent in America, that's been given. There's a doctor out in California, Johanna Olsen Kennedy, who is now the subject of a lawsuit. She put a child on puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and ultimately gave them a mastectomy through so-called gender-affirming care. The NIH funded Johanna Olsen Kennedy's study. I mean, I think it was given, green light to give puberty blockers to 8-year-olds. So the kids in America, the vaccine schedule, I think we're going to see a lot of scrutiny about that, about the food, and what kinds of things have been put in our children's food and marketed to them that are hurting them and giving them disease. And so I'm really excited about the future in America, because, man, it got really dark for the future of children for a time.
I am too. I live in New York, and we're not vaccinating I have an 8-month-old, and we're not vaccinating him with anything. Like I can't imagine like an exception to that at this point. And just from being pregnant and, starting from in my 3rd trimester, they're trying to push like what was it, like pertussis diphtheria, like while you're still pregnant. I'm like, what is the reasoning for this? Well, we want to make sure that the immunity lasts through when they're 6 months old and they can start getting their own shots. But I'm like, the baby's not really going to be like leaving the house. Like when you actually like break down the reasons for like, why do I need hepatitis B? Isn't that for STDs?
And why do we not push breastfeeding? I mean, the breastfeeding
Yeah.
gives the antibodies from the mom to the baby and helps keep the baby healthy. So if we really care about healthy babies, we should really be focusing on breastfeeding.
Yeah.
I don't see a renewed focus on that. I'm hoping that there will be. As far as the vaccine schedule is concerned, I just think that it's appropriate for parents to ask questions about whether or not their children need something, need a vaccine, or they don't need a vaccine. And doctors should be open to answering parents' questions. People should be able to see what the ingredients are in the vaccine and ask, is that healthy for my child? I'll tell you, Chrissy, congratulations on your baby, by the way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I interviewed Peter McCullough.
I love him.
I think in beginning of 2022, I'm thinking, and my podcast got pulled down off of YouTube with him, because we spoke about, I asked him if women who are pregnant should get the COVID vaccine, and they pulled that episode down. And so, anytime someone's going to tell you that you can't ask questions when it comes to your body or your child, you should always be immediately up in arms and asking even more questions.
I remember the whole time I was pregnant, I would be asking Peter questions like over Instagram, like, should I get this? Should I get that? Which of these are safe? He'd be like, none. And so what a helpful, and I'm there with you about breastfeeding. Like I've been low key obsessed with it, just reading so much about it, like before giving birth in like these last 8 months. And because it was so pivotal. I met this lactation consultant in the hospital, and we bonded so much. I just felt like we were on the same page with everything. And then like these doctors and nurses would come in, like, like you just given birth like a day or two ago. And they'd be like, the doctors and nurses would be like, well, you don't want to put pressure on yourself to be the baby's only source of nutrients and food. So, if here are these formula, like samples, and like they were really pushing the formula, and the lactation consultants were obviously really pushing for breastfeeding. They'd be like, no, you can do it. Give yourself time. Like my milk didn't come in till really 5 days. And in that time, like those 5 days take forever when you're a new mom and you're panicking. Like my friend is going through it right now. Just gave birth like 5 days ago. And she's like, I'm freaking out. And the baby's kind of small. And they want to supplement with this other stuff. But the lactation consultants, like they really, I don't want to categorize them as like they're crunchy, because really it's like what you should be doing. And they would explain to me, they were like, Christy, nobody makes money off of you breastfeeding. It's just
Right.
And these formula
And it's
companies,
the best thing for your baby.
Yep.
And you're right. It does take time and patience. I've had 4 kids. I've breastfed all 4 children. It was kind of, you have to train the baby every time to nurse, like, you know, so you have to, so every baby's different. And, but it's a beautiful thing. And it's, especially in the economic times we're in, it's cost effective. And,
a formula this big is like $35-$40.
yeah,
You know,
it comes right off the tap, warm and ready to go. So that's nice. You don't have to do a lot of bottle washing if you don't want to. So anyway, so I just think, I believe in every instance in America when we're dealing with issues of family, that healthy moms mean healthy kids. And we should be doing everything we can to make sure that women who are carrying babies are healthy and getting the maternal care that they need. And after you have a baby, and even as you care for your children, that we're really investing in women's health and family health. And I don't think we've really done that in America, honestly. Women's health really hasn't gotten the attention that it could and should, evidenced by the fact that apparently men think that they can become women. So I don't think we've been very clear about the differences, but we should be. I just think, you know, more focus on moms and healthy families.
Oh yeah, for sure. And just like, you know, there's people go, and I went to do Timcast recently, like maybe about a month ago, and you know, there's this thing where like, well, you have to pump or breastfeed basically every 3 hours during the day. If it's nighttime, it's really 5. But I kept 3 hours in my head. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go do this trip, and it was 24 hours in total. And I brought like this breast milk cooler and my big, not even a small portable pump, my big ass electric pump. And I'm like pumping in the airport bathrooms. Like I really tried to stay, because you're kind of afraid that you're going to lose your flow or whatever. And I'm sloshing around this like cooler of milk, and like the TSA is unzipping it and going through. I'm like, it's breast milk. What do you want to taste it? Buddy, you want me to make you a smoothie with it? Like, what are we doing here? And I'm like sloshing around, literally like spilling it. The bags are opening up. It was a fun time.
That was fun TSA time. I'm not going to lie. I'm glad I wasn't behind you on a Friday morning enough.
It's fun. And then I'm glad I read up about like the rules. Like they have to let you bring it on. They shouldn't really be like, you know, going through it, whatever. But they just like, they can make formula pretty good, but there's so much that they can't put in formula
really
that comes from your mom.
American formula sucks. They really can't. So this is my PSA. If you're a mom or you're thinking about having babies, figure out how you breastfeed. It's not easy at first. It is. It's going to take you some time for your milk to come in, but it's really important to do it, and you'll never regret it. Honestly, if you get the hang of it, you just won't regret it. So
yeah, I would say too, as much time as you spend like looking at your registry and looking at Pinterest and putting your nursery together, you should be spending just as much time like taking a childbirth class or like looking into breastfeeding, like it's a job. You got to like prepare.
The best help you get is from your friends. You said you have a friend who's waiting. It's difficult. You're right. I remember I had this very good friend, Gloria, and it was after I had my first baby, and I brought her home and I was having trouble breastfeeding, and she came over. I just remember I was sitting on the floor in my kitchen because I had like sunk to the floor. And I was like, this is so hard. And you know, the baby gets hungry. So the baby cries with you more, which makes it harder for them to latch on. And I just remember she sat down on the floor with me and she was like, we're going to get through this. And so that's the best gift you can give somebody. I think if you're a mom, if you have a friend who's a new mom, is to help get over the line.
You're so panicked because you think like, I'm a failure and
the baby's losing weight.
I can't do this. Right. The baby's stomach is so small when they're born. In fact, infants are there. There's multiple accounts of babies being pulled from, you know, wreckage of earthquakes and like horrible situations like that, and who've been like ignored for days. And they actually are, you know, while they're in utero, there's something about when babies are first born, they can kind of withstand, like their stomachs are so small, they don't need a lot of food right away. They just need, you know, your colostrum. They just need like drops of it, you know, to get through. And it's just amazing. It's like God prepares them to be like, all right, if you have a wonky crazy birth, like
Yeah,
you have some days to get it together. But yeah, I don't know how we got on this tangent. But anyway, yeah, breast milk, super important, has white blood cells in it, which formula companies can't make. And I remember I bought like just in case of emergency formula. And I have like a right-wing mom. Shout out to the right-wing moms group on Twitter that I'm a part of. And they recommended, I forget what brand it was, but it's not American for formula.
Yeah.
And so I had that like just in case. And thank God it's been 8 months and he hasn't had any formula. So
Good for you.
I feel like a success. How did
Chrissy, to that point, like women in general and feminism, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit, but like my mom's generation was kind of conditioned to not breastfeed.
in the 70s, right? Like was it 70s, 80s? They thought it would ruin their boobs. Like the boomers were weirdly sort of vain and strange
They were
about
conditioned that way.
about motherhood that way.
Anyway, so we can continue, different subject.
Yeah, there were these shots that I think women in the 70s would take to like dry up their milk, and then they had horrible side effects. I think maybe you did touch on this, but how did COVID prepare you for Moms for Liberty?
I think school board probably prepared me for COVID and Moms for Liberty, honestly. As I said before, I'm a disruptor by nature. I come in, I like to look at systems, the way that things are working or being done, and then ask, are the outcomes what we want? And if not, how are we going to change the way we're doing things? And so that really happened on school board. I got to see behind the scenes government and the way that government works, the way that school board works, who really has the interest of children at heart and who's actually making decisions. And so I think all of that really prepared me for Moms for Liberty. To be able to help to lead other moms to be effective advocates, to not just get angry, but to learn where the levers of power are so that they can get involved and really make change happen.
You mentioned on, I think it was the PBD podcast, that the unions, they celebrate themselves to protect themselves. I thought that was a really interesting way of putting it. Can you give us an example of how they do that?
Yeah, graduation rates. So you have, like, if you look at any given school district, kids aren't doing well in school. 4th grade reading scores stink. 8th grade reading scores sometimes are worse. And then all of a sudden you have 80% of kids or 90% of kids graduating. And how is that possible? There's not a lot of reading remediation that's happening between 8th and 12th grade. And so, the school districts work really hard to get that graduation rate up. They say that a 4-year graduation rate is the best indicator of success for a school system or for a superintendent. Certainly, they use that as a barometer for success. And so they don't want to show that as a bad number. So they kind of game the system. They just celebrate a million little things. And it's not that there aren't things to be celebrated within the public education system. There are good things that happen, and we should celebrate kids. But, ultimately, sometimes you'll have a school district, and this happened during COVID a lot, that their reading scores don't go down, but they don't go up, but they don't go down, but the other districts around them went down. So then they celebrate like they're the best. They used to be 31st in the state, and now they're 7th in the state. But did your reading scores get better? Do you have more kids reading on grade level? No, just other people got worse. Okay. So it's that type of celebrate themselves to protect themselves, where they'll find ways to kind of, the example of the school district where where my kids went to school, Chrissy, where you had, the majority of white kids reading on grade level, the vast majority of Black kids not reading on grade level, but they celebrated the A, and it masked the kids, the failure of the other kids to read. Now, why weren't they learning how to read? There are a number of different factors that came from higher poverty homes, and children who come from high poverty homes tend to struggle more in school because they are not as kindergarten ready, some might say, right? They don't know how to hold a pencil. They may not know their alphabet. They can't spell their name. They don't know their numbers. And so if they don't have those fundamentals, then they're starting behind, and those fundamentals have to be built. So you have a great disparity in the classroom between kids who kind of have those fundamental skills and kids who don't. But the bottom line is, as an administrator, as a teacher, as a principal, or a teacher, you have to figure out how you're going to differentiate the instruction in the classroom in order to reach each child where they are, because that's the way the classrooms are set up. They're set up so you have a wide array of abilities in the classroom, and oftentimes children who are also are special needs who are getting additional services. So if you're not a principal that's setting up the school in a way where you're differentiating instruction in the classroom and supporting the teachers to do that, then the kids who aren't learning how to read are going to struggle. And continue to struggle. And I know I'm being very serious. Would you like me to continue on about?
No, this is so interesting because I remember, yeah.
Go ahead.
Plus, like with all of the illegals coming in, and like I know the teachers and the schools get so taxed because where are all these like the illegal kids gonna go?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because they don't have the translation services. I actually went out to Springfield, Ohio with Vivek Ramaswamy, and we did a town hall there. But before we did the town hall, we met with some Haitian immigrants, and then we met with some of the community members. And the schools, I think they had about 1,200 kids that had entered into the school system. So not huge compared to the 20,000 immigrants who had settled there, but 1 in every 10 babies in Springfield is being born to a Haitian migrant. So that will change. But anyway, so yeah, the schools are having trouble to respond to the needs of the kids. Forget having a bunch of kids in the classroom that can't speak English. And come from, not just and it's not just like Spanish English. Now you have, you have a wide array of languages of kids coming into our American public schools that don't have translators. I was talking about reading, just to talk about reading for a second so people understand why it's so incredibly important. Kids need to read to learn by 3rd grade, because 3rd grade is kind of the age where then they have to learn. They learn to read so they can then read to learn in 3rd grade. If you can't read by 3rd grade, you really get left in the dust. And it's horrible. So 80% of the kids that are involved in our juvenile justice system across the United States of America, these are kids who get in trouble, and the justice system that's created in order to help to shepherd them and hopefully give them different tools and resources in life than an adult, like throwing away the key, right? These kids are functionally illiterate, 80%.
Wow.
If you look at the prison system, male prisoners read at an average of a 1st grade level, women at an average of a 3rd grade level. And then if you look at the recidivism rates, they drop by 80% if you teach people to read when they're in prison. So reading is like this special key to life in the United States that we all need to know and understand how to read. We need to be teaching kids how to read. And if they don't know how to read, we are relegating them to a life of struggle and crime. And there is no reason for it. If we did nothing else in our public schools, nothing, especially elementary school, nothing else, Chrissy, we should teach kids how to read. 95% of kids have the ability to learn how to read, and that's neurodiverse kids as well. So kids who are on the spectrum, kids who have special learning issues, 95% have the ability to learn to read. So I would like to see us focus less, I joke about, less on the LGBTQs, less on this focus of sexual orientation in kids and sex. I don't know why we're talking to kids about sex so much. It makes no sense to me.
It's insane.
And let's just teach them how to read. And maybe we could use books without dildos. That's what I said. Maybe we could use books that don't.
What a wild concept. Yeah. And I was like listening to what you were saying before about like kids in poverty they're not reading, and like the Black kids have like poor reading skills. Is it because does DEI come into play here where parents or teachers feel like, well, I can't fail this Black kid because he can't read, so let me just sort of like move him along?
Honestly, I don't think that's so. I think it's across the board, Black, white. It doesn't matter. I think that the moving along part it's kind of just part of what they do. I think that there are excuses made for kids in classrooms, or teachers will make excuses sometimes. And I love teachers, by the way. So please, this doesn't go for all teachers. But, I think that there is sometimes this idea of like, well, the lift is really heavy for some of the kids in the class. If the teachers don't have the supports to be able to reach that child, if you're one teacher and you have 18 students in a classroom and you have 8 of those students or 10 of those students who cannot read, cannot hold a pencil, have never written their name, don't know their alphabet, they do not know their numbers. And then you have 8 kids who are reading, who know all the plan look like.
Ugh.
Where do you start?
Wow.
How do you keep the ones who are doing it already from getting bored because they don't need to learn their ABCs, and yet still get the kids where they are coming into you up to the level where they need? It's very, very difficult. I do not envy that job. And if I could if I could wave a magic wand, one thing I would do would be to put at least 2 teachers into every K-3 classroom. If there was an influx of funding and we had a lot of skilled people that were willing to go in and teach kids how to read, because truly, once the kids can read, then they can start, learning themselves. Then they can teach themselves. They can read about the things they're interested in. But unfortunately, that's not happening right now. And the burden on your communities, it's horrible for the kids. And then it's horrible for the community too, because it costs the community an enormous amount of money to not have people graduating from high school learning how to read, knowing how to read. It's a real problem with crime and economic development. I don't know what a future looks like in America with the majority of Americans not being able how to read.
That's very scary. A ray of light from the chat says, Tiffany, I'm helping end seclusion rooms in Indiana. They are horrible.
Oh, yeah.
What's a seclusion room?
I would imagine it's a room where then they put the kids if they're misbehaving or they need to be removed from the Gen Pop. They would put the kids in separate rooms maybe, and then they do something stupid called course recovery, where the kids who fail on out of school or fail courses then have to go in and do the courses by themselves on a computer with an adult monitoring their computer use. Because that sounds right. You fail whatever the course is, and then you're going to have to teach yourself on the computer. It sounds like, that sounds, lock them down alone for hours. That's horrible.
That sounds horrible. From Gianna in the chat, sickening. My 10-year-old reads better than almost every adult in prison. We should be ashamed as a society.
We should. That's why they're in prison. I mean, honestly, recidivism drops by 80% when people learn to read in prison. They don't go back to prison. That's what, and it's not hard to teach people how to read. Honestly, it just takes a little time and intention. I mean, we should be focusing on teaching people how to read in all of our prisons. That should be a major focus.
Wow. So maybe what we have is more of an education problem than a crime problem.
I think so. 100%. I think we do. And I mean, I say we should focus on teaching people to read in prison. Let's teach the kids how to read so they don't have to go to prison, so they don't feel like they can't support themselves and their family and they have to steal or sell drugs or what have you. Like, let's teach the kids how to read so we can really unfold their full potential in life.
Definitely. This was would you consider your interview with Joy Reid to be like your most viral moment?
Probably. Although I danced with President Trump and that got a lot of the dance got a lot of play, but I think this was a big moment. The Joy Reid interview was really a moment where we showed America that the whole idea of the kids need the books was a lie.
How did you prepare for this interview? Because she's such a see you next Tuesday, and she's so kind of dishonest with you in this interview. Did you know what to expect? Did you know how much time you were going to have? Did you know what kind of questions she was going to ask you?
Yeah, you ask good questions. It's interesting. So they told me 6 to 7 minutes. It ended up running about 16. And I didn't know what we were going to talk about. I had no idea. They had wanted me to come in and they had wanted me to do a taped interview for like a couple of years. And I said, no, I wouldn't do taped, but I would come in live. And so we did a town hall in New York and I went in the next night. How did I prepare? Would you like to know the truth of how I prepared?
Yes.
Okay, I'll tell you. So there's a book called You Are the Message by Roger Ailes. And Roger talks about...
he was the Fox News guy, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
He talks about how when he would go out for scouting for the Mike Douglas show, and he would go and meet different people around the country, news anchors, and he would go into his hotel room because you couldn't just go online and watch them. You had to actually go to the location so you could see them. And he would turn the show on that they were on, and he would put it on mute. And then he would watch it for 5 to 10 minutes and he would see if there was anything that person did within the 5 or 10 minutes that made him want to turn the volume up. And
I think I've heard this before.
Yeah. And so whenever I do news and media, I always think about, you are the message. Everything about you is the message. And I just thought I'm going to go on this show. And there are a lot of people that are going to think that they hate me. They've been told that I want to ban books or that I don't like kids who are gay, or that I don't believe in equal rights, or, all these different things they've been told about me. I'm a racist, I'm a transphobe, I'm a bigot, whatever. And this was my one opportunity for them to see me and to hear me talk with joy. And I just thought, I'm going to keep a smile on my face. I'm going to be, we call it a joyful warrior at Moms for Liberty. And I'm just going to be really honest and engage with her in a joyful manner. And then I went on and she played a clip of the first time. I know, but I sat down and she said, we're just going to play this clip of you on Bannon's War Room. And I was like, oh, I wonder which one she's going to. And then
Steve Bannon's show. Okay.
She showed, with Steve. And she showed the first time I was ever in studio with him, which was such a happy moment. And I watched it, and she said he had asked me to define parental rights. That's something he was very good about when I first started. Like, make sure you define parental rights, Tiffany. You need to explain to people what those are. And so she shows it, cuts to me, and she says, you know, do you still stand for what you said on the show? And I was like, absolutely. And then she said, and what about Black parents? Do they have rights? And I was like, yep. And what about gay parents or parents with gay kids? Do they have rights? And I said, yep. And it was just awesome. And so then we just were off to the races, and I just took every opportunity to kind of show all the holes in her argument. And I think I did.
Wow. Okay. I know there's a moment on here. This whole interview is so good. Were you scared to talk to her? I would be. I don't know. I feel
loved
like
it. It was great. That's my Super Bowl.
okay. Yeah, you just absolutely rose to the occasion.
Thank you.
Okay, let me click on this.
Rights as well. All parents. Sure. So let me point you to some statistics, because the question becomes then who gets to decide what all kids get to read. The Washington Post took a look at that about 1,000 plus books.
The book, I can't remember the title of it, but the book is like you give specific examples of a book that is in public schools.
All the Boys Aren't Blue. Yeah.
All Boys Aren't Blue. There's like hand job instructions in there. They mention dildos, and like you're saying the things that like are uncomfortable to say, but I think you have to say them, because then, just like I think you mentioned with on PBD's show, you're like, you have to look at the book. You have to hold it in your hands and look through it to know. And if you as an adult are getting creeped out by it, how do you think kids feel? And Joy's trying, well, don't you want gay parents and gay kids to read this? And you were like, well, and this was a perfect moment where Joy is saying, well, you know, you don't want to deny kids who resonate with the story. And I was like, this is the perfect moment for you. Like, cause she set herself up to be knocked down so perfectly. And you were like, if you resonate with the story of being raped by a family member, then you should be seeing a therapist. You should be, you know, you should get major help. I think it was like just such a really cool moment. I think it was maybe somewhere along the middle. Let me see.
Of a young girl. Mouse, which is a book about the Holocaust, a graphic novel. Genderqueer, a memoir. All Boys Aren't Blue. Beloved, Martin Luther King Jr. and the March on Washington. Ruby Bridges Goes to School. Slaughterhouse-Five, The Color Purple, Forever by Judy Blume.
Oh, she's mentioning like it's really unfair what she's doing. She's mentioning
She liked it. She's threw a bunch of books together. You had to pick it. Listen, this was a fencing match. So you couldn't engage in every single thing that she was going to throw at you. You had to pick and choose. She brings up a book called All the Boys Aren't Blue. And she says, what about a parent who wants their child to have this book? What about a child that feels seen by this book? And my answer back to her was, Joy, this book is about a young man who's anally raped by his adult family member. If a child feels seen by this book, that means that they have been the victim of a predator. And the idea that we like somehow are going to fight harder to keep these books in libraries in case a kid needs to like stumble upon it, then we are going to be honest about the fact that, again, kids have been treated like such garbage in this country. If we have an epidemic of adults that are preying on children, if there are so many children that are being molested that need this type of intervention, then my God, we need to like take a hard look in the mirror and do something better than be like, oh, let's put some books in the library that has a adult. He writes this book. It's called a memoir manifesto. Like, I hope it was cathartic for him, because it must be a horrible experience to be raped by your family member, anally raped. But like, does that mean that 12-year-olds who are also being raped need to see this book so that they feel like connected? No. In fact, a lot of psychologists will tell you that children who have experienced sexual assault find it very traumatizing to once again come into contact with that type of experience in literature. Now, there's a lot to unpack here, because I interviewed someone called Chad Felix Green. He's very active on Twitter. He's a gay man who said that within the gay male community, there is a problem, an issue that needs to be addressed of older men preying on younger boys. And that's something that is real. It's something that's out there that gay men know, that it's something in the culture of and he talks about, and this is his words, not mine. He talks about it. And his advice to moms who have kids who are gay, especially boys, was protect the what out of them, to like watch them like a hawk and make sure that there aren't predators who are trying to get to their boys. So, this really is an epidemic that I think, of kids just being preyed upon by adults in America. That's why the Q plus on LGBTQ plus is concerning. LGB, sexual orientation. T, mental health distress. If you think you were born in the wrong body, or you think maybe you're a cat, I want you to get the help that you need, but me pretending that you're a cat or born in the wrong body or that you're a woman or what have you is not going to help you. And then Q plus, Q is a political ideology with no limiting principle. Queer theory, Michel Foucault, Judith Butler, others talk about queer theory and being queer. At one point, they liken having a preference for children and sexual intercourse as liking spicy food.
Oh, come on.
But that's what I'm saying to you. So when you see people say queer or queer plus, like they call it minor attracted person, they don't come out against pedophilia, because that in itself would mean that it wasn't queer, because it's a limiting principle. They'd have to put the line somewhere. Wow. And so, drag queen pedagogy, the drag queens in the schools and everything, they talk about the fact that drag is an initiation into queer. And so, again, we come back to the point that kids have just been, the parents have to protect the kids, Chrissy. It's up to us. It's up to the parents, because nobody else is going to protect them like we are. And we've been sold this lie, this bill of goods, that somehow we have to make other people feel happy and comfortable in their lives at our children's expense. And that's just not true.
No, and it never used to be like that you'd have to, I don't know. I just think growing up, like, my parents were not asking me what I was learning, and they weren't asking anything about school. I mean, I wonder if it's because my mom worked in the middle school at the time, like she was in the school system. So
I don't think people had to worry as much, though.
They weren't worried.
Critical theory and queer theory. I mean, I'm 45. How old are you?
I'm 41.
Okay. So same generation, right? I just don't think our parents had to worry about these things as much. I think that there was, I think it was the start of indoctrination happening in our schools, or our schools starting to be used as thought formation. So I'll just give you like a history lesson quickly. I'll be fast. In 1978, something was passed called the Women's Equity Act. And then you started to see federal money coming in once the Department of Education was created to kind of to work on changing the way the kids thought about things. There was a big move and pilot project to change the way that women and men thought about themselves and their roles in society, for kids to question that. Marlo Thomas and Carol Channing were commissioned to write a song. They had cutouts of men and women with clothes, but there wouldn't be female clothes. It was only boys. And so feminism, if we don't think that feminism spectacularly failed, we could just look at all the 12-year-old, 13-year-old girls that don't think they want to grow up to be women and moms, and recognize how spectacularly feminism failed in America to really help women.
Yes, absolutely. Because a lot of these girls who end up transitioning, it's because they have been abused and they are ashamed of their femininity. And that's why they want their female parts gone. And they want to kind of, and they never end up looking male or masculine. They kind of just look asexual. They look just kind of in between. Because you're not going to get rid of your small frame, that you have as like a 12, 13-year-old girl.
Press the fact, Chrissy, that when kids go through puberty, there are a million things that are happening. Mental development, cognitive, their prefrontal cortex, bone density, like the idea that we just stop secondary sex characteristics with puberty blockers, and that, the kid can just, is like development and growing up is like a light switch we can turn on and off. Parents, please know these drugs are not reversible. They cause lifelong harm for your children, and parents have been lied to about stuff like that across America. It's really the moment for parents to stand up and just to say, demand the truth. Just demand the truth. Say, we want accurate information so we can make the best decisions for our kids. Company, you want to make the cereal with red food dye? You know what? Then tell me it's going to give my kid cancer, and then I get to make the choice about whether or not I want to give it to them.
Right. And these drugs are not a pause button. You can't just resume. It's like, no, it's chunks of development are are forever gone and can't be repaired. Lastly, why do moms love Trump, and how can Trump target transgenderism in schools? What do you think is his plan?
Yeah, why do moms love Trump? Because he's a real guy, and I ultimately felt like women did want to protect her, and we're mad, we're angry to see how many people profit off of our kids, and you feel like such a victim in it because you're like, where do I do? What can I? How do
Yeah.
I stop it? And so I think people love Trump because they know that he means business and he is focused on our issues. He pays attention to the issues. He spoke at our summit last year, and he was very direct about caring about parental rights and what was happening in the schools. I interviewed him at the summit this past year. And again, he just, really said, who are these bureaucrats? He said, I really think that they don't like the kids. Like, they're doing a lot of bad stuff for the kids, right? Of course, the parents love them the most. And so I think that that's what resonates with people. He's a dad, he's a husband, he's a business person, and he really loves the American people. What can President Trump do about transgenderism in schools? Well, there was an important court case that was just out of Mount Lebanon School District in Pennsylvania that said that teachers in first grade who had decided to teach children that they might have been born on the wrong body on Transgender Awareness Day, not a prepared lesson plan. Parents were not aware of it. Parents could not opt out. It was given to their students without them knowing. And so they were held accountable for that. And that judge ruled that it was a violation of the parents' First and 14th Amendment rights,
Wow.
religious liberty, and due process. And so, you can opt out of other things in the school. So you should have been able to opt out of this, the judge said. Also, teaching children that there's more than just men and women is antithetical to many different religions in their teaching. And so this idea that somehow the school can teach your child those types of things and that it doesn't violate your religion is pretty crazy. But we'll probably end up having a circuit split in a lot of these different things because, in different places, judge rule in different ways. Appellate court judges across the United States have been incredibly important in winning our country back. If there's one other area besides school board that I would suggest that people pay attention to if they're looking at local elections, statewide elections, look at the judicial races. They're so incredibly important. Pennsylvania is going to have the chance to vote in 2025 not to retain a few justices, a few judges that they have, and then they can vote for new judges in 2026. Wisconsin Supreme Court has a seat up in 2026 that'll be very important. And these people make very important decisions. Chrissy, I think a lot of Americans, we thought, well, yeah, this is wrong and it's happening and it's bad. But of course, when it gets to the court system, when it gets to the judge, then the judge is going to see what's right and what's wrong, and we're going to stop the stuff that's wrong. I think a lot of Americans had faith in that. And what we found is that's not always the case. In Montgomery County, a similar case was brought to the case that in Mount Lebanon, where parents can't opt their kids out of transgender gender ideology instruction starting in kindergarten, that it can happen at any time in the day, that it can be part of curriculum. And that judge ruled that that was fine. And so that case is headed to the Supreme Court, hopefully. And so we'll see what happens. But this is the battle for our this is the battle for the future of America. We can fix the economy. We can get immigration under control. We can do all of those things. But if we do not reclaim and reform our public education system, we will lose our country eventually. We are in the middle of a cultural revolution in this country, and President Trump being elected was just the first step in getting our country back. And we've got to stop the indoctrination of the kids in the schools, the building of a red guard in America. We can't let anybody drive a wedge between us and our kids.
Yeah. My God, you're a hero, Tiffany. It's so true and I think our country was able to get this way because just our schools are kind of just crumbling. And I feel like that's all by design. Like if kids are growing up to be kind of like stupid and they're not reading on their own, they don't have their own intellectual curiosity, they're just kind of, then they end up being like worker bee drones for the system. I think that's kind of ultimately what they want.
Chrissy, imagine if we couldn't have read couldn't have looked at during COVID, if we couldn't have read anything when our speech was being suppressed, but even the data that we were seeing, right? I mean, that it was a heavy lift for me to really start reading a lot of the scientific evidence for, against masking, and to start looking at the vaccines and what was happening and the data about what the cases were like. And, I just think about a nation of people that are illiterate and they won't be able to challenge anything. Because they
No.
won't have the tools that they need to be able to do that. And so we have to fight really hard to make sure that our kids don't live the rest of their lives on their knees.
You said the conservative movement has been ignoring schools for too long. Why do you think that is?
There's not any money in school board races, and people like to, first of all, conservatives in general just want to like live and let live. I think there's a certain amount of like, just let us, we just want to live our lives. And, there were a lot of funders who just really weren't involved in school board races or schools. I would hear a lot when Moms for Liberty first started, oh, we don't want to get involved in the culture war. Well, the culture war is interested in you.
Yep.
Your kids and your grandchildren, and you can take your kids out of public school and put them in private school. But I'll tell you what, a lot of those private schools have the same crap running through them. The Cultural Revolution does not care. It's looking for schools and ways to get to kids, and it doesn't care if it's public or private. Now, with the public schools, we're funding it with our own taxpayer money, and we have an avenue to change the direction, so we should change that. But yeah, there's not a lot of money in running school board races, and I don't think that we really understood the importance of the public schools. And I think the conservative movement in general really focused on school choice for the past 20 years.
Yeah.
I love that. I love we should have education freedom. No child should be trapped in a failing school. But it's not, I think it's foolish to think that we're going to completely abolish public schools. They are going to continue to exist. And I think it's a value of the United States to want to teach kids how to read. I think there will be even a debate about, you have a lot of kids in this country who may not be citizens, and are they, should they be going to the schools? Should they have access to, and my answer is yes. I think we should be, if there's a child and they have huge potential, children have unlimited potential, and it's our job to help them to find who they're meant to be. And so I think every kid should learn to read so we can help them to, really become who they're meant to be. It could be the next little Elon Musk. Who knows?
Oh my God, I would love that. See, he can't have all the kids, he's doing his part to have little Elon Musks. But yeah, we need to help out there and get.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right. Your kids are lucky to have you, Tiffany. We as a country are so lucky to have you. You're giving me a lot of hope for the future, and I feel
it's
like
our moms, Chrissy.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you that. I mean, it's not me. I am Moms for Liberty because I'm one of our moms, as we always say. Hashtag I am Moms for Liberty. But the reason that we've grown the way that we have is because I am a mom for liberty. I know these moms. I understand what they're concerned about, and I know how passionate they are. Nobody is going to fight for anything like a mom is going to fight to protect her kids.
That's so true. Tiffany, where can people find you other than tuning into the Joyful Warriors podcast and following you on Twitter/X @4TiffanyJustice?
So Joyful Warrior podcast is going to start up in January with new episodes, but there are quite a few there. And if you're interested in any of the issues that I've talked about today, the rise of communism in America or Marxism, that what's happening with our kids, with gender ideology, how to help your kids in school. So the podcast is a great place just to kind of browse through and see if anything piques your interest. Moms for Liberty is on X. We're on Facebook as well. Our chapters have accounts on Facebook, so you can join if you live in a certain area. You can join as a member, and then you get to be a part of that organization. I just say go to the website and click on the big map there. Each map will show you a drop down of where we have counties. If you don't see your county on that list, you can click to start one. And the last thing I want to tell you is, Chrissy, I have to tell you because I have to take the chance because it's so cute. We wrote a kid's book.
Oh my God, yes, so cute.
I'll send
gonna
it to you.
Here we go. Full screen. How cute. Libby Justice goes to Williamsburg. Is this Williamsburg, Brooklyn?
Williamsburg, Virginia. So she goes. So Libby travels around the country with her children. With her parents, and her brother Link, and they go to different places. And in this book, in this one, Libby is scared to speak at home, but she wants to speak about fixing a playground. She goes to Williamsburg and she gets some advice from some famous historical figures who help her to find her voice. And then she is an artist, so she likes to draw as she travels. So it's a really beautiful book. It gives you some different ways to talk about these issues with your kids. And we just felt like there was so many garbage books in schools across the country that we were going to do our part to put a better book on the map. So you can go to our website and get that book there.
That's so cute. Yes, everybody get this book for Christmas. Shove it in your kid's stocking. That's so exciting. Thank you so much, Tiffany. Thank you for the time. I'm just so blown away by you. You're incredible.
Thanks.
Everyone follow Tiffany. Thanks again for the time. Thank you to the chat. for your comments and questions. And we will see you guys next time.